Okay, everybody, we are here today, a couple of days before Christmas, with Mr. Adrian Consonery Jr., who is running for the Georgia Secretary of State office, the Democratic nomination for it this early 2026, early as in May. Adrian, how you doing this morning? Or this
I'm doing
afternoon? I guess it's afternoon now. So,
I'm doing fantastic. It's great to be here.
oh, good. And thank you for coming. No, it's a busy time for you. It's just going to get busier. I guess the holiday break's probably your last slow period for a while. So I'm glad you were able to get us in there. So, all right. Well, I know we've met a couple times. You've come up to our events on two different occasions. So met with you. We've had a good time both times, and always give the candidates on these the first shot just to sort of introduce who you are. Whatever personal stuff you want to talk about, it's up to you. So I'll just turn it over to you. Tell us who you are and what you're all about.
Absolutely. Well, first and foremost, again, thank you for having me here.
No
I
problem.
am Adrian Consonery Jr. I'm running for Georgia Secretary of State, but I am also a native of Georgia. I was born and raised in Marietta, product of the Cobb County School District as a graduate of Hillgrove High School. My higher education coming from Grambling State University's College of Business, studying business management, understanding everything of the ins and outs of how business is supposed to be ran. And I was able to apply that same knowledge into me starting up a few different businesses. I started up my own nonprofit organization called Lifeline Initiative Incorporated, a 501(c)(3) focused on community development, vocational rehabilitation, and amplifying the voice of the people. I was also a two-time published author, and while I was a student at Grambling, I started up my own piece of business so I could pay my rent. So, definitely very well versed when it comes to being a business owner, but also being the son of two entrepreneurs, my father being a mobile mechanic and my mother being a faith-based clinical counselor. So both of their actual occupations are designed to identify a problem and become the solution to it. And that has definitely thoroughly influenced my upbringing. And so there's a lot about me that I could say, but my
Right.
biggest thing is just service first, and service can only come from a servant. So I'm ready to be that.
Okay, well, thank you for that, and thank you for, as always, I tell everybody, thank you for running in any office statewide. So it's a big challenge, and I always appreciate anybody who's willing to do that. So, okay, let's get into it. Why are you running specifically for the Secretary of State office?
Absolutely. Well, it actually starts back in 2020. While again, a lot happened at Grambling, but while I was a student at Grambling, I sent in my absentee ballot to have my voice heard in the 2020 presidential election, for both the primary and the general election. And they challenged my vote. They said that I had 3 days to come back to the state to prove I was who I said I was, or else they were throwing out my ballot. And this led to me not only having to fight for my own voice in that manner, but me going down the rabbit hole of voting rights, trying to figure out what the problem was and what the situation was, and realizing just how many people were affected by this decision. And it wasn't just me. There was over 40,000 people who actually had their actual mail-in ballots challenged that year, and over 70,000 that were actually thrown out. And it's like, how do we go about these nuances and these different voter intimidation tactics, voter suppression tactics that do take place when we are supposed to have our voice heard? So I started working in voter advocacy, voter registration, voter education, and protection all across the country, working with various different nonpartisan organizations in order to go into different communities to make sure that they had their voice heard, making sure they had the resources available in order to let their voice be heard, and the resources that they needed to hold their elected leaders accountable. And this led to me going literally everywhere. And last year, when the results of the 2024 presidential election happened, I was actually in Pennsylvania. And it hit me, no matter how much work I do on the outside, unless something changes fundamentally on the inside, we will be fighting an uphill battle that will seem hopeless. But if someone is in an office that is able to have the best interest in mind of those who are doing the work on the outside and having the best interest in mind of those who they genuinely are their constituents, rather than the will of a party or the will of a madman, we can see the fundamental changes that we need. And so I'm a firm believer that those closest to the problem are closest to the solution. And because my vote was challenged, well, I need to go to the position that holds the votes, and that's the Secretary of State.
Was the challenge one of those signature things that I run into that from time to time? It was one. Okay,
Ye-
okay. Right. So they challenge you on the signature. You have to prove and all that. Okay. Yeah,
Mhm.
that's definitely been an issue. And just to kind of top off what you're saying, not specifically for that, but our own election officer here in our county, as well as two counties over, they both resigned recently just because of all these challenges and everything. They're getting tired of all the nonsense that they're having to put up with, and that's not anything unique. That's happened quite a bit around the
Mhm.
state. So yeah, there's a lot of that kind of stuff going on. And this, you've already mentioned Secretary of State has a lot to do with elections. Of course, it oversees them. It has a lot of fun. Actually, Secretary of State office has a lot of different functions, but probably elections and licensing are the two main ones. I guess that's the ones that most people encounter the most. So let's start with the election again. But maybe besides what you've already talked about, is there anything about the functioning of the elections division of the Secretary of State office itself that you think needs to be changed? And if so, what?
A plethora of things need to be changed with it. First and foremost, this archaic version of, oh, use it or lose it, purging people from the voter rolls, like that needs to stop. That has to be ending with the quickness, because there is no reason for someone to have their vote, their registration status revoked simply because they chose not to partake in an election cycle or two
Right,
election cycles. I actually had a very near friend of mine who, if I had not spoken up about the deadline of October 6th for this actual election cycle that took place for 2025, he would not have gone and looked to see that he was inactive, even though he voted in the last presidential election. And that hit me, and I was like, how? So what took place? What made it to where you weren't able to be
right,
seen? And apparently it was because he had moved, but they did not think to give him any type of notice of saying, hey, you need to update your registration, you need to update your registration or anything of that nature. He was
right,
just purged. It was just inactive. I saw the status of inactive on his my voter page. And so I'm like,
right,
well, I was able to catch him. How many other people don't know? And
right,
so that's definitely something that I want to completely get rid of when it comes to the voter purges. That has to stop. Purging people from the voter rolls is, it almost is, it's borderline unconstitutional. Now, I do understand with the Motor Voter Act that we're supposed to have up to date voter registration rolls and everything of that nature.
right,
However, in us going through and making sure that the system itself is working properly, we do not need to be system over people. We need to make sure
right,
that people are heard and valued. People are met with all of the same vim and vigor that we would have to meet anybody else, and letting them know, hey, this is what's going on, participate here, even if something is going on, having a grace period, understanding that, okay, if someone does go inactive, we need to do every single portion of what we can to reach them. If we can't reach them by mail, reach them by email. If we can't reach them by email, reach them by phone. If you can't reach them by phone, send somebody, pull up, go to the
right,
door, see what's going on, and actually have this going on. And that leads into something of the of an aspect that is missing from the Secretary of State office, which is the customer service aspect of it. The Secretary of State is over everything when it comes to commerce and businesses as well as professions, and all of these different things have customer service in common. Yet when people come to get all of the needs that they have from the Secretary of State, no customer service is genuinely given across the board.
right.
So that aspect needs to be added in. But if I had to say something with the elections division, the number one thing is getting rid of that voter purge system and having something come into place where we can have accurate roles, but not disenfranchising our people here in the state.
Okay. And the other one about state licensing, what do you know about that and what needs to be changed, you think?
Well, the biggest thing is with our state licensing for people in healthcare divisions, like when we have our nurses or when we have our therapists. As the son of a therapist, I do know the importance of getting that licensure very quickly and to make sure
Right,
that the renewal process is also quick and streamlined, because the moment that it may possibly relapse, you can't do your practice. If you can't do your
right,
practice, people are not getting the help that they need. So when we're in this time frame right now where healthcare is everybody's big concern, if we don't have people that are ready to go into the workforce in a timely manner and a timely fashion, that talent pool closes up, the job market closes up, people lose the ability to actually go in and work. So the Secretary of State office must be about productivity and efficiency so that way everybody can be productive and giving back to the state. So I look to make it to where everybody can get their license within a 2 month time span. I want to work with all the individual boards that have to approve of these different licensures to come through instead of having it to where people tell horror stories of, oh, it took me 4 months. Oh, it took me 6 months. When you go and you get your degree and you go and you get everything that is supposed to come from the from your professional line of study and you pass every test that's needed, time should be on your side. It should not be an adversary for you. So we have to work to make sure that they have what they need to get into this line of work, to give people the help and healthcare that they need.
And just to put a little cherry on top of what you said a couple of times here, I had a friend personally who moved from California to Georgia, was trying to get her licensing through. It wasn't going through. She couldn't get a response. She had to actually contact the people in California to try and figure out what was wrong. And they figured it out. And it was a form that she had missed that nobody had told her she needed. But yeah, you're right. It was way too slow. There's no help involved. And I've heard that complaint about people over and over and over again. So the licensing thing, elections is huge, of course, but I think licensing kind of sneaks under the radar until you have to deal with these people. And it seems to have been a problem for a long time. So hopefully you can do something about that, the speed of it or whatever it is that's causing this problem. I don't know, lack of manpower. I don't know what it is, but it is a problem for sure. Okay, are there any other issues besides those areas that you think the Secretary of State needs to focus on, customer service and all that stuff? But what other areas do you think maybe
Well,
besides
I'll be
all of the above?
honest.
All of them, right? But I mean, one or two big ones, something.
Well, I will be honest with you, because I'm a huge believer in supporting small businesses. Like I said, I understand the plight of an entrepreneur. You take the risk in order to make sure that you have time for your family, to make your own schedule and everything of that nature. And I don't see a lot of support for small businesses coming from the Secretary of State office in a manner that would be subsequently, what's the term I'm looking for? Adequate, because just doing bare minimum for our small businesses, that doesn't do a lot. We need to highlight them. We need to celebrate them. I do feel as if there should be classes that teach the youth how to be a business owner. Because now in this time of, especially within Metro Atlanta, there everybody starts up their own businesses. Everybody goes and they have their own ideas. They want to make their own money. They have their own brands, which is great, but they lack guidance. Think about how immensely great it would be if the Secretary of State office invested in their business education early on to allow them to have the firm foundation of getting their business off the ground, getting their business to be a well-oiled machine. What you would probably see is a lot of people say, okay, this is a lot. Maybe I shouldn't be working by myself on this. Let me build a team around me. Let me bring my friends with me. Let's see how we can go and try to make this wealth happen and work for us. Then teaching them how to be these business owners, they're now learning more and more and more. So they start to give out more and more and more. And then this cycle of continuous support continues to go through. Next thing we know, Georgia is even farther, and better than a lot of the other states across the country because we have now invested in our economic development from an early age for our individuals here within the state. So I would highly recommend, well, I would not even recommend, that is something that I genuinely want to do is investing in the education of young entrepreneurs. On top of this, I would also like to talk about financial literacy because of another role that not a lot of people talk about with the Secretary of State is the monitoring of the Georgia securities market. And with the Georgia securities market, that's investments. That's everything when it comes to money flowing throughout the state. So how can we go and teach people what to do with the money that comes to them so that way they can keep the dollar circulating in their own communities? When they go and they have all of these different get rich quick schemes, which we know do not work and are not something that can fundamentally make somebody better in the long run. When you get this lump sum of cash that comes in, like if we would have had a proper financial literacy course given to some people or things have made available when we had our stimulus checks come in 2020, I do believe we will be seeing a very different Georgia. But we just gave lump sums of cash and said, do with it what you will. Now, of course, there was a lot that was happening at that moment, so drastic times call for drastic measures. But if something like that were to happen again, would people be able to take that money and make it do what it can do to help them in the long run, or would we squander it again? So, if the Secretary of State office can push financial literacy far stronger than what has been going on now, because I do believe that right now there's a FinFit program that does happen from Brad Raffensperger, but it's not amplified. It's not pushed. It's not in the areas that it needs to be at. We're not in our lower income areas. We're not in our rural communities. We're in metro Atlanta or we're in Atlanta having these FinFit classes. People need to know financial literacy all across the state. So we need to invest in places like Macon. We need to invest in places like Trenton. We need to invest in places like Chatsworth. We need to invest in places that are not just Atlanta. We need to invest in Georgians. And that is my biggest concern is how to be a Secretary of State for all Georgians.
Thank you. I didn't even know about that program. Thank you for bringing that up. Okay, so you are in a primary, and as we speak, there are two candidates, you and another one. And so this next question, you can answer this more, you can answer it by focusing on you or comparative, however you want to do it. But what sets you apart from other Democrats or the other Democrat in this race? What advantages do you have that you think the other candidate may not have? Et cetera. You can again, you can answer that however you like, but how about that? What advantages do you have, for example? Do you
Well,
think?
one thing I will definitely say is that I've never ran for a position before. So I don't know how to be the average politician. Don't know what the way that all of the politicians normally work and run with their campaigns or anything of that nature. That's not in my psyche. It's not in my wheelhouse. And that's not to say that those who have run before do not have insight and guidance that they can give or wisdom that they can have in their own positions.
Right.
But what I will say is that because I do not have that knowledge, I only know how to be a servant. I've been doing service ever since I was like 16, maybe even before that, because I just used to go and serve with my parents. So I don't know how to be anything but a servant. And in these positions, we are called to be servants. Service can only come from those who genuinely serve. That's a part of their nature. And so, with that as well, and I won't be the one to talk down on another Democratic candidate because I do believe that if we can get the seat, we can get the seat. That's
Right.
what needs to happen. But I do have something on my side that not a lot of people do have, and that is honestly my age. I am young. I just turned 26. And so I'm really excited about this year that is coming up. But with me having this in mind, I know that I'm ready to do the work. I've got the energy to do the work. I've got the will and the desire to do this work. No one is behind me trying to say, okay, continue, 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 or oh, you got to pick up, you got to go. No, they're trying to hold me back from going everywhere because I've got this energy and this willingness to meet everyone in the state. And that is something that we don't have right now. There's a lot of people who feel as if it's a chore to go out to rural counties. They feel as if it's a chore to go and meet every individual person at an event. I'll be honest, I'm sometimes the last person to leave an event because I genuinely just want to talk with everyone. I don't feel as if my time is too I won't say that. I feel as if as a politician you must be accessible to your people. And if you are not accessible, something is wrong. So make yourself accessible. Make it to where people can talk with you. Because at the end of the day, you have to have them in mind when you're in rooms that they can't be in. And that's something that I have genuinely as a power. is that I will have every single person in my mind when I am in those rooms having to talk with people. Because when I am elected, I won't just be a Democratic Secretary of State. I will be a Secretary of State for every single constituent within the state of Georgia. And that means Democrat, Republican, Independent, whatever it may be, I will represent them. And I have to have that in mind.
Right. Okay. And so accessibility, I think, your accessibility to others, I think, is a big part of how I've seen you run your campaign so far. So that kind of bleeds into the next question about political strategy. Is that your main strategy for the primary campaign, just getting out and talking to all areas of Georgia versus Metro? I guess that's sort of it. But other things that you may want to talk about, donation, money, about how
Oh,
much money you think you need to raise, that kind of stuff. Anything about your strategy there that you want to give. You don't have to give away your trade secrets or anything, but you know what I mean. Just anything that you want to talk about that you do think is helpful for a voter to know that this is how I'm going to run my campaign. That kind of stuff.
the way I will run my campaign is by service to them, is by service to you. Every time I go and I meet somebody and I tell them that I am running for this, and this may be the company trade secret, but if you hear somebody else doing this after this interview, well, you know where they got it from. Uh,
All right.
but I lead every conversation with, "Hi, I'm Adrian Consonery, running for Secretary of State. How can the Secretary of State office better serve you?" And that hits home because then people take that moment to either be honest with me and say, "Oh, I don't really know what the Secretary of State does." And then that leads into a conversation of enlightenment.
Right.
Or I tell them that, and they tell me they know exactly what the Secretary of State does, and they give me a list of things that they would like to see happen. And every time I have had that conversation take place, we immediately start to problem solve. We start to write different things down. We start to figure out what needs to take place, what can go and not infect, but what can go and impact what their
Right.
lifestyle looks like. So, in order to do this across the entire state, I have to get all across the state. I have to reach all 159 counties, and we've been doing a pretty good job of hitting as many as possible. But I know that we have a whole nother year that we have to do this for, and I'm excited to meet every single person. In order to run an effective campaign, I do think that I will need around $2 million. And with that 2 million, that will go towards literature, that will go towards yard signs, that will go towards making sure that I can have my volunteers dressed in the proper attire, making sure they have everything. That goes to platforming programs, that goes towards advertisements, letting people know what we need to do moving forward. That goes towards so much. And the beautiful thing is none of it goes towards me. So
Right.
so
Right.
it just goes to help out what the message is and amplifying that message so people know that when they hear it and they hear my name, they can hear themselves in that seat.
Okay. Well, that's good. You kind of answered two questions at once there, which is cool. About also the general election, the $2 million. I think it is an expensive endeavor. It's an open seat this year, so that's an advantage. I think having that open, you won't have to be in against an incumbent. So there is that advantage. But yeah, it's going to be an expensive race for sure, and you're going to be part of a coordinated campaign, of course. But every person in that coordinated campaign is going to need their own individual donations. So thank you for that answer. I think you pretty much covered both of those. In fact, we're kind of at the end now. You've covered a lot of ground here. So I always like to give at the end, candidate, here's your 1, 2, 3 minute stump speech on why people should vote for Adrian Consonery for Secretary of State. So I'll turn the floor over to you and you close it out with how you address that particular question.
Absolutely. Well, first, again, I got to say thank you. But this is something that I want for everyone to understand. The Secretary of State is the last line of defense when it comes to democracy within the state of Georgia. Having someone within that seat that understands the importance and the necessity of maintaining the integrity of your voice in our elections is so, so important because quite easily anybody could make a call into the Secretary of State office. And if the right voice gets into the wrong ear, we could lose our very power that we have as our constitutional right. So having someone in that position, having someone in that seat that does not see themselves as just representing one party, but sees themselves as representing the people, that is so, so necessary. We cannot allow for anybody to come through and try to destroy our democracy, and they can't allow anybody to push an agenda that is written by a madman. I am Adrian Consonery Jr. I am someone who is of the people, for the people, and by the people, regardless of age, creed, or race. And I want you to know that no matter what happens, no matter what takes place, I will always have Georgians in my mind because I am a Georgia First Native. So I look forward to serving you all in the Secretary of State office. And trust me, my door will always be open, and you can always come and talk to me.
All right. Well, Adrian, thank you so much. It's always been fun. It's always fun to talk with you. I've had a pleasure doing that a couple of times. Love to hear your ideas. You've got a lot of them, a lot of good ideas, and I'm looking forward to seeing you throughout the upcoming year. And I wish you and your family a Merry Christmas too, as well as we close out here.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you and yours as well.
All right. Thank you so
Thank
much. Oh, let's see. I didn't want to do that.
Thank you again for this, Mr. Tom. I really
Oh,
appreciate
no,
it.